Welcome to the DaVinci Hour podcast, presented by DaVinci Academy. I am your host, Dr. Maxwell Cooper. This episode is a part of our DaVinci Innovators series, which feature physicians, inventors, and entrepreneurs working on innovative medical technology. Our guests for these episodes discuss developing new medical technology, building medtech companies, and advice for anyone going through the process of medical innovation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the DaVinci Hour podcast. I'm Maxwell Cooper with DaVinci Academy, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest, Mark Cuban, who, as many of you know, is a serial entrepreneur, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, a shark on Shark Tank, and then the recent co-founder of Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs, which I'm very excited to talk to him about. So Mark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Cooper.
Sure. So, I'll just kick it off. There's a stat out there that 1 in 10 Americans skip their medications or skip doses of their medications to save money because of the sky high cost of prescription drugs. So I'm curious, what is Cost Plus Drugs and what is kind of your overall mission to help tackle that public health issue?
Well, for the very reason you mentioned, it's insane that in this country, people have to choose between food and shelter and other expenses versus their medications. And so I got a cold email from Dr. Alex Oshmayansky, who's also a radiologist, and he had been working on this for a few years in Denver, and we started exchanging some ideas. And I was like, look, we can't work on this just like other attempts to lower the cost of drugs. We've got to take this in a whole different direction. And it was interesting because this was close to 4 years ago, and there had been some, for whatever reason, Martin Shkreli, the Pharma bro, popped up in the headlines again. And I was like, look, if this dude can raise prices 7,500%, there's no reason why we can't cut prices as well, because it just tells you, particularly for generics, there's not any price controls one way or the other. And when you start looking at it, obviously, as you guys know and your audience knows, the industry has obfuscated everything. So it's almost impossible to determine why a drug costs what it does. And so we decided that by adding some transparency and working on a cost plus basis, it'll simplify things enough so that it makes it easy for patients and doctors and all stakeholders, insurance companies, hospitals, etc., clinics to understand what we're doing and why our pricing is the way it is. So we decided to create the Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company with the operative words being cost plus. And basically we thought, okay, at 15%, if we can be really, really lean and mean, we can make this business work. And maybe not make a lot of money, but be self-sustaining so we're not dependent on anybody else, and be fungible so we can be agile and adapt. So we created the Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs Company going on, almost 4 years now, with the orientation being that we will be radically transparent. We will show our actual costs. We will mark it up 15%. And then because we're working with a third party for our pharmacy fulfillment, we'll charge, in this case, TruePill, we'll charge their fulfillment fee, actually, plus shipping because it's mail order. And that's it. And everybody will be able to see it. Everybody will be able to understand it. And after 3 years of getting all the licenses and registrations and everything else that's required to sell drugs by mail, or even, market them by mail, we launched Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs on January 19th, 2022, almost 5 months to the day. And it's just been insane how it's taken off.
Yeah, that's amazing. I commend you and your colleagues for starting this really transformative company. I think I've noticed on your site, you have now a couple hundred drugs on there. Is that and growing is what it seems.
Yeah, we're at about 800 drugs and growing. We hope to be, well past 1,000 by year end, including brand name drugs. And, we're adding not only new drugs, but also, new formulations, I guess, and so that we can keep on expanding our inventory so we meet the needs of more and more patients.
Gotcha. So my understanding is, there's between when the drug is produced to when it gets to the patient, you obviously have the manufacturers like Pfizer, Merck, you have the pharmacies like CVS, Walgreens and such. Then you have these, pharmacy benefit managers and the insurance companies. I guess, where do you guys fit into all of that whole mix?
We're outside of all that, completely outside of it. The only place we connect, if you will, is directly to manufacturers and distributors and wholesalers. And so where we can work directly with the manufacturer, whether they're a generics manufacturer, as long as they're all FDA approved, obviously, um, whether it's generics or brand name manufacturers, we try to work directly. And where we work through a distributor for whatever reason or a wholesaler, we just make sure that our pricing can be lower than what anybody else offers.
Gotcha. So you go essentially straight to the source in the
Yeah.
most simplest form. And then I noticed you don't take insurance. I guess maybe could you elaborate a little bit on why that is?
Because there's actually two reasons. One is the technical side of it, right? Because it adds complexity to our front end software that ingests prescriptions, if you will, at on the website. So that's one thing. So we wanted to get launched, and so we're working on software that are interface to insurance companies. And two, in order to really sell to insurance companies and act as a PBM effectively, and maintain the pricing that we have to have a larger formulary. You can't launch with 110 drugs because, the incumbents that are working with insurance companies aren't going to be really happy at what we're doing. So we had to work around them initially. And once we build up our formulary to be able to have enough of an impact on insurance companies, we will work with insurance companies. And we're already on the road to that, presuming we can get all the I's dotted and T's crossed.
Gotcha. So I'm curious from the provider and the patient end. So say I see a patient in my clinic, I write them a prescription for their medication. If they want to go to your website versus how does that work versus going if they go to their local pharmacy and fill it?
Same way, you use your EMR and you just put it in there. Is that right? The EMR? I always get my acronyms. Yeah.
Yeah, the e-scripts. Yeah.
E-scripts, yeah. So you put it in you put in my name, right? And then it pops up and, then they take the script and you can send it right. There's a when you sign, let me take a step back. When a patient signs up for an account on costplusdrugs.com, we enable all the information for them to give to their physician. And then the physician just uses the EMR to send right to the information that they provided, whether it's fax, phone, or online.
Excellent. I mean, that's really easy to use and
super simple. Yeah.
Also good for the patients. I guess what kind of feedback have you gotten from physicians that have been, pointing patients your guys' way? Is there?
You just go on Twitter and just do a search for cost plus drugs. It's insane. From patients and physicians. There was one this morning I was looking at, and he said, "Well, finally, a patient said something nice to me because I just cut the price of their drugs down significantly." And because there's many stress points, obviously, as a physician when you're dealing with patients. When you're giving the news, and then when you're explaining to them, whatever medications, and then you have to explain what it takes to get to those medications, depending on what it is. And it's just natural for anybody, even people with good insurance, to all of a sudden feel a sense of dread when it comes to, having to go pay for those medications. And so, when a doctor's been able to say, okay, let's go to costplusdrugs.com, see if they carry it. And if they do, we'll do it through them. Everybody's happy. The price points are just so much lower. And what often happens is we're far lower than the copays of people that have insurance. And so a big part of our business is people with really, really good insurance that maybe they haven't hit their deductibles yet, or maybe their copay is $25, which seems reasonable if the drug is going to be $500 or even $100. But if we're pushing that price down to $6, or $12, and it's lower than your copay, then, it's a no-brainer to work with us. And that's effectively what's happening every minute of every day now as we're growing. We're already past where we expected to be 2 years in.
That's amazing, and congrats on your early success. That's amazing. I'll echo. I was looking at your Twitter yesterday, and there was, I think, a patient that said he saved like $900 on his medications. It's just amazing. And I can tell you, the first year of my residency was more general medicine, and I worked a lot of it at a county hospital here in Atlanta, Grady Hospital, which serves a lot of the underinsured or uninsured patients. And it's not just being able to afford the medications; it's the health of patients. We would see unfortunately it's a recurring cycle, as I'm sure you've heard, where patients don't, they run out of money, they can't take their meds because they can't afford it, and they keep coming back and getting readmitted. And it's just and so I would imagine with this, if you're not hearing it already, that you're going to see dramatically improved outcomes for patients as well.
That's a big part of the goal, right? I mean, obviously you've got to get people to take their drugs, and they've got to
Hmm.
be able to have access to them. And then, we'll also work with clinics and in some cases with some of the dish hospitals where, one of the things they'll do is send in the prescription, but a clinic or even the hospital sometimes will put in their credit card. So it gets dinged to the corporate or whatever it may be credit card, because they understand that that patient will be readmitted if they're not taking their medications. And, the cost of just dealing with the administration for a hospital like Grady, right, where it'll cost them more to have to readmit them, and the time it'll take to try to get reimbursed for some percentage of that amount, it's cheaper just, particularly now with our costs, it's cheaper just to pay for it for them. And we're starting to see that from clinics and hospitals already.
That's amazing. And I'm wondering, I would imagine a lot of patients with insurance are even probably given these, it's not like you're saving people $5 or $6. Like this is, life-changing money, per month. And so I imagine even patients with insurance are seeing a major benefit from this.
Oh yeah, of course. If it's less than your copay, that says all you need to know. And the other thing we'll do is we'll let you put in a custom number of pills or whatever it may be, right? So instead of just ordering 1 month or 3 months or even 6 months, we'll let you put in whatever your doctor will prescribe. So if you decide that, okay, the price is so low and hey, I just got, I have enough money right now, can we do it for a year? We'll do that for you as long as the doctor prescribes it. And to give you an example for ED, the generic of Cialis, I think on a 90-day, our price per pill is like 18 cents.
That's amazing. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
I mean, I'm curious, so maybe walk me, I think you talked a little bit about it, but how do you guys, obviously you're a for-profit business, which I think is interesting. And I guess maybe even backing up a step, I remember your co-founder, who's also a radiologist, he had talked about that he considered starting it as a nonprofit. And then instead you guys have done it as a for-profit and a public benefit corporation. I guess from your vantage point as an investor and an entrepreneur, was that to help scale faster? Is that the advantage that plays over a nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of advantages over being a nonprofit, but in particular, we get to reinvest money, and you're under a different microscope, right? I didn't want to be in a position. One of the challenges that all charities have is they're in a very difficult cycle where they're continuously raising money, and yeah, I could provide the money and get the tax write-off. But this way, I want it to be self-fulfilling, right? I want it to be able to pay for itself so that we can make choices based off of what patients need. And it also allows us to reduce pricing as well, believe it or not. We've already had, 100 plus price cuts. So as our volumes go up and our costs go down, or we bring in new manufacturers who now trust working with us and get our costs down, we try to have, price drop Friday every couple of weeks where we reduce pricing. And so being a public benefit corporation just gave us a little bit more flexibility. It also opens doors in who we can work with. So if, there's limits on affiliated organizations and this and that may be able to help us, and maybe I have an investment in them already or whatever it may be. We're just trying to optimize. That's all. And we're also trying to move fast and break things, because, we know that we're not going to be the best friend of a lot of the big pharma companies, and so we've got to be really, really able to be as agile as we possibly can.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm curious, are you seeing any competition, or do you foresee any competition from companies such as like Amazon or Walmart that have pharmacies in place, have large distribution, can already offer, obviously not as low prices as you guys have, but, compared to what else is out there? Yeah.
I mean, look, there's GoodRx, there's Walmart, there's, Kroger's, there's Amazon. They all have different programs, but they all tend to work through the PBM programs, right? So because where they're at, they have to prescribe or fulfill all drugs, right? They need
Right.
to, and the only way really when you're just starting to do that is to work with PBMs. And once you work with PBMs, you're in that infrastructure that really puts a lot of constraints on how you can do things. That's why when you look at some of the discount cards, there'll be one price at one pharmacy, and then 3 blocks down, it's 3 times as much or a third as much. And then 3 months later, that discount's not even available any longer. And so while those cards are great, and anything that gets the price down is great, we're consistent and we're transparent. And so we expect more and more competition, but that's okay. If someone puts me out of business and it's cost plus 10, and as long as they stay with it, hey, more power to them. Mission accomplished, right? Because the goal is to change the game. And I think, we haven't done it yet, and there's a long way to go, but at least, we've stepped on their little toe. And there's now, a significant, approaching 1 million patients who are able to save money on their medications.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And I've noticed, again, scrolling through your Twitter feed, all the different patients you guys are helping it. You have, and then going through your catalog of drugs that you offer, hypertension drugs, cancer drugs, diabetes drugs, all types of classes of medications. Has there been any kind of systematic approach to that, or are there any other meds you're looking to add in the near future?
Yeah, we want to add them all. And actually, with our manufacturing plant that we're building, that'll be open hopefully in November, we're doing injectables. So we're taking generics and injectables, because injectables are hard to make, and there's a lot of times there's shortages, and a lot of times the organizations that are in that business know they got the hospitals basically, and they don't have a lot of flexibility in access or pricing, and so we want to solve that problem, and we've designed it with a lot of robotics in place so that we can do one round of one type of injectable, then switch to the next, then the next, and the next, and make 3 months worth of inventory, and then keep on rotating all the way through. So we try to find solutions. We will carry all drugs, but we try to find solutions to equity problems where there are shortages or other issues that are creating scarcity that unfairly cause the price of these drugs to go up.
Gotcha. I'm curious. I know you mentioned on a previous interview you did where you're talking about working on getting insulin, because that, as that diabetes is a major public health issue. It's the number one cause of, renal failure, blindness, all these types of, serious comorbidities. I'm wondering how's the progress been on doing that?
I can't make any promises, but, our biggest challenge is going to be, if and when we can get it, is going to be delivering it in the scale that people will want. And so anybody out there that has patients on insulin, I would strongly suggest that they go to costplusdrugs.com and sign up, and just, we ask you what drugs you carry that you want that we don't carry, and, sign up and tell us which insulin you use and from where, because if we can get it, then we're going to have to do it on a first come first serve basis. So, because just delivering insulin is just more complicated because it's refrigerated, obviously.
Sure.
And so, it'll still be cost plus 15% if we can get it, and the fulfillment price will be higher because it's got to be refrigerated, as will the delivery. But we're hoping, again, knock on wood, we can get under that $35 to $40 price point before the ancillary costs.
Gotcha. Now, this is really cool that you're essentially doing in-house production down the road with this new plant, and you said you're focusing on injectables. I'm curious, do you plan to get involved in drug development on any level? I know that's a very expensive process, but is it no?
No interest at all. You're not going to see us add telemedicine. There's not going to be any bells and whistles. You're going to have, if you have a patient that's trying to do this on their own and is not computer literate, our customer service is not going to be as great. There's not going to be someone to spend 2 hours on the phone with them. They'll be able to spend 15 minutes on the phone with them, because, we made a choice that, no bells and whistles, lean and mean. Even if there's kind of a pain process for some older patients to try to work through this, it beats the alternative. And unfortunately, the only way we can do cost plus 15% is if our fixed and variable costs are as low as we possibly can keep them. And that allows us to keep on adding more drugs and invest in, like I said, if we can get insulin, to put in everything that we need to enable fulfillment there.
Gotcha. Have you seen any barriers with physicians being able to offer this through like their practice or the health system they're in? Is there any kind of feedback you've received in that regard?
Well, obviously there's some scenarios where physicians will get referral rates and all that kind of stuff, and so there's some issues there, but physicians tend to know, particularly primary care physicians, tend to know the insurance circumstances of each of their patients. unless they're in a big practice and they're just going, at that point, it's not really on them. But we have, where they know that this is an issue and there's not, a zero copay on insurance, it's always been a positive. But, we haven't really run into a groundswell of issues where certain, doctors can't prescribe through us.
Gotcha. No, that's excellent. And, I wanted to come back for a second. You mentioned your co-founder is also a radiologist, a physician, and CEO. And it sounds like I think you said he cold emailed you out of the blue. And I'm curious, you must get offered. I couldn't even imagine how many business opportunities you get offered. I guess what about his particular, pitch or email, if you will, and this space made you want to jump on board?
Well, I get pitches every day. And typically what I do is I'll read through the first paragraph, and if it's compelling, then I'll read the rest of the email. And when someone comes to me and says, "Okay, I have an approach that I think will cut the cost of medication significantly," then I'm listening. And originally, he was a compound pharmacy that was a nonprofit, as you mentioned. And then I had conversations with him on how we could scale it up and how we can market it, how we could keep our costs down. Completely contrary to a typical pharmacy approach. And then we had a meeting, we just kind of mind bonded on that approach, and it just, grew from there. And, his skill set is completely different from mine, and we complement each other very, very well.
That's awesome. So it sounds like from your standpoint, you're, obviously business strategy, and then, essentially getting the word out, using your platform, your large following to get the word out about cost plus drugs. Is that fair to say?
Strategy and marketing and sales and helping understand the finance part of it and the return part of it and the cash part of it. I'm writing the checks, so it's not cheap. So I mean, basically, Alex understands all the doctor side of it, right? All the medical side, and he also runs the day-to-day as the CEO in terms of getting the factory built. The dude's smart, right? He is. I mean, obviously, to be a doctor, you have to be, but the dude is super smart. And he's very anal and organized, which I'm not. And so we complement each other very, very well.
That's awesome. I'm curious, have you worked with a number of physician entrepreneurs before, and what's kind of been your overall experience with them?
Physician entrepreneurs there's two really horrible entrepreneurs to work with: inventors and doctors. Inventors, they don't want to run a business; they just want to invent. Doctors, because they try to do everything. So they've got it all figured out from A to Z, right? And so just because when you're that smart, you kind of try to have your arms around everything. And so as a physician, in my experience, it's what's the best way to put this? There's a lot of guessing involved in being a doctor, but it's all educated guessing, right?
Sure.
And there's not a lot of things that are written in stone. It's very rare that something's absolute. And more often than not, you just do your best with the knowledge available and information available to you. And business is very analogous to that, right? Where you do your best, and people who acquire the most information tend to have an advantage. And so because those things are very comparable and the same in a lot of respects, they think, well, I got all this locked down, I'll have the business side locked down too. And it hasn't always worked that way. Some of them were able to figure it out, but more often than not, doctors are good if we can designate our roles, right? So that's where my investments with doctors have worked. So you handle that side of it, I'll handle this side of it, like I have with Alex, and then it tends to work out.
Interesting. I have a mentor here at Emory that, he is involved in device development. He says doctors make good chief medical officers, but not good CEOs, and for the most part. And it seems to echo kind of what your experience is. I'm curious if there any of the ones that have been successful or successful chief executives, is there anything you notice among them, or is it more they just kind of had a natural ability for it? Or
no, it's that they accept what they don't know, because the nature of being a doctor and an entrepreneur to a certain extent is you got to find the answer. You've got to find, and you've got to know when you can be wrong, right? And with a patient, the consequences obviously can be far worse than in a business, but you've got to be confident in conveying that you're confident, right? And it's not so much a scale issue. In business, scale is an issue. You're not trying to get it's a negative these days. And I've got a best friend who does physician consulting and counseling, and you guys all know the burnout issue. And so, just trying to scale up and add more and more and more patients isn't a positive for physicians, particularly these days. Whereas, that's the nature of a business. And so, the doctors that have done well know what they don't know that there's a lot of the business side that's counter to what they've grown up with, if you will. And it's better to partner with people who can do those things.
Excellent. No, that's great advice. Great advice. And I think the other thing I'll comment on as physicians, we're trained to be very risk averse, which,
Yeah.
As you know all too well, entrepreneurship, you have to take risks. You have to.
But honestly, I'm as risk averse as they come. Just like of all the range of options you have when you talk to a patient, you've got to try to apply a probability to the one that you think has the best outcomes and share the top three and hope you can explain it in a way that allows them to make your patient to make a decision, or so they trust you to make the decision. And business making decisions is very similar. Of all the potential outcomes that your dollars can find, you want to pick the one that has the greatest probability of success. And so I'm very risk averse. I try to always do my homework so the amount of risk that I'm taking is minimal, and I try to play to my strengths. Now, sometimes, like particularly on Shark Tank, I'll wing it because that's a TV show, and and if I'm helping somebody and I'm giving them $75,000 or $100,000, myself and the team that I have can help them, and it's not maybe the optimal investment, but in business, I think those people who are the most risk averse are the most successful. But to other people from the outside looking in, it looks to be risky. It's just you just got to do your homework to get that edge.
Gotcha. So it's calculated risk versus just being a total maverick. I guess kind of to close things out, I was going through your site, Mark Cuban Companies, and you obviously invested in a wide variety of companies, and including some health technology companies in addition to cost plus drugs. I guess there's one companies I think that deal with vertigo, and then some telehealth and AI companies. I guess and when it comes to healthcare, are there any companies you like to focus on or that really get you excited?
It really depends on when it happened. Like I've got a company in Cincinnati, Genesthesis, that every organ in your body emits electrical pulse at some level, right? Mm-hmm. And there's devices that scan it. And what they did, they took AI rather, and they took the output of that scanner, turned it into a sound file, and used AI to be able to determine, with a range of outcomes, what's happening with your heart. Right. And so that was very interesting. It's just now getting FDA approval. I've got Ready, Set, Go, which is a Shark Tank company that is a healthcare company that has for new parents with infants formula that allows them to develop responses to allergies or preempt allergies. Right. So because so many kids now are getting peanut and other types of allergies. So I like to do things that can have widespread impact and be game changers, but that's all kind of dying down now because all my money and focus now is on cost plus drugs.
Gotcha. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to talk with us and tell us more about Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs. And I guess to close out, where can people find it? Is it, the website, social media,
Yep.
such first?
Go to costplusdrugs.com. And on social media, we're at Cost Plus Drugs on all platforms. Try it out. Check out our prices. Have somebody in your office that whatever you prescribe the most, take a look to see if we can save money. And even if someone's got insurance, check it out anyways, because chances are we're lower than their copay. And if we don't carry it, please have the patient set up an account and put in whatever meds they're taking, because once we add those medications, we'll alert them to let them know and tell them what the pricing is.
Gotcha. Well, Mark Cuban, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it, Dr. Cooper. Thanks. It was a great interview.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DaVinci Hour podcast, presented by DaVinci Academy. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your podcast platform of choice to catch the latest episodes. Please leave a comment or a review and share it with a friend. Lastly, you can find all of our podcasts, video courses, and books on our website, dviacademy.com. Thank you for listening.